You're listening to Boobies and Newbies, brought to you by the Frolic Podcast Network. This episode is brought to you by Kensington's latest title, Unstable by Alexandra Ivy. Y'all, this episode is coming to you severely late, but I am pleased to say it comes with a fantastic romantic suspense recommendation. Alexandra Ivy's newest novel will appeal to fans of Lisa Jackson, Karen Rose, Mary Burton, and really all lovers of romantic suspense, especially those who enjoy harder-edged thrillers. This latest installment in Ivy's Pike, Wisconsin series, perfect for those of you playing along with the Boobies and Newbies 50 Romances, 50 States reading challenge this year, emphasizes the creepiness of small towns that hide a lot of secrets. It's a solid blend of alpha romance and creepy thrills, full of unforgettable twists, a fierce female heroine, and a second chance romance between ex-husband and wife. You know I love a couple with history. Unstable by Alexandra Ivy is available now wherever books are sold. Find out more about the book and Kensington's other new and upcoming titles at kensingtonbooks.com. And now, back to the show. Welcome to Boobies and Newbies, the podcast that asks novice romance readers to think outside the dick in a box and brave the unbridled world of erotica. I'm your host, Kelly Reynolds, and today's episode is all about choices. How often have you read a romance and found yourself wishing the characters made different decisions? Maybe you've even found yourself lusting after a supporting character who sadly never got their own story. Thankfully, today's book gives readers the opportunity to right such wrongs and then some. But first things first, let's talk business. You can always catch up on past episodes of Boobies and Newbies on your favorite podcast app or, of course, on boobiesandnewbies.com. If you're a fan of the show and you've got a few minutes to spare, I would greatly appreciate a positive review on Apple Podcasts. And last but not least, if you would like to show the podcast a little extra love, might I recommend you join us on Patreon. We've got monthly patron-only events, early sneak peeks, bonus clips, and so much more. And you gain instant access to it for as little as $1 per month. You will find links to all of the above in today's show notes. And now, please join me in welcoming today's guest, host of the Curated Conversations podcast, Rosemary Watson.
Whoop, whoop. I'm here, you guys. This is so fun.
Whoop, whoop. Air horn. Brr, brr, brr.
I am so excited. And shall I say, I am so excited for Slick Summer Nights.
Oh, I'm so excited that you're excited.
I cannot wait. It sounds amazing. And it, like, in my brain, the song from Grease, Those Summer Nights, is playing in my mind, but it's hot. It's Slick Summer Nights instead of Those Summer Nights. Can't wait.
And you know what's so funny is, as much as I love a good pun or play on like a title or something, that was not even, I don't believe that it wasn't crossing my mind as a musical theater nerd. Like, I can't believe that wasn't crossing my mind when I came up with that name and offered it as a suggestion to our followers to vote for, but maybe it was like a subconscious thing because, again, musical theater nerd for life here.
Yeah, I can't believe that you haven't been singing that in your head the entire time, because that should be the theme song of that entire series. I can't wait to read every single one of those and spend every freaking summer night staying up till 2 a.m., sweating my ass off under the covers for the steam that's going to be coming out from under those covers.
It's the best way to sweat. It's the one great positive way to sweat.
It really is. It's the best. And you don't even have to do any cardio. I mean, you can't.
Exactly. Reading is my cardio.
Amen, sister.
Well, let's talk about Curated Conversations because I was lucky enough to be a guest recently, but why don't you tell all the good people about your podcast you have, Rosemary?
Absolutely. Well, we were lucky enough to have you as a guest. It was a delight and a treasure to have you on. So for Curated Conversations, I actually run a digital media agency called Artisan Creative Media. Ooh, just all jumbled there for a minute. And we decided a really good way to connect with people just in the creative industry that either maybe eventually could become clients or potentially could be like amazing referral like resources for us, or just people that we could learn from ourselves, you know, and just look at what they were doing. Like Boobies and Newbies is such a great example. My business partner and my friend Krista and I, we really were interested in doing a romance novel podcast. So it was just like such a perfect, like, I don't know, serendipity moment when we found you, and we were like, she's doing it, and she's doing it so well, and she's so funny, and she's such a cool twist on it, like finding people that are new to the genre. It was just such a compelling, you know, model of what we could create. So that's what the podcast is all about, just finding out, reaching out to these creatives, these business owners, these entrepreneurs, these coaches, you know, people with all different backgrounds, that we could kind of create this little ecosystem around and have these fun conversations and dig into really like the genesis of your business or brand, and then take people through kind of the evolution, because I think every single person we've ever interviewed, their business has evolved and changed. Their brand, their website, their offerings are all much different than what they originally kind of came out to be. So I just found that to be really fascinating. And so we're just continuing on with that tradition. We have 2 seasons under our belt. And it's just been a really fun journey for us.
Yeah. And of course, we have to give a shout out to our friend, our mutual Heidi, Heidi is the connector of all digital friendships. Like Heidi's been a guest on Boobies and Newbies. I know she's been a guest on Curated Conversations, and she is the almighty hype woman. So if people are not already following Heidi, she also has a podcast as well. You need to be, because she is a goddamn delight.
She really is. She was actually, I think, our second interview on our podcast, and then I was on her podcast, and it was just fun times. Like, that's exactly what I mean. It's like, we wanted to create a podcast where it was like, who do we want to go to Mexico with and spend all week on the beach drinking margaritas? Get those people on our podcast. And you are one of those people, and Heidi is one of those people.
You name the date and time, and I will meet you in Mexico for margaritas.
Amen. We're manifesting that. I'm telling you. It's nice.
That sounds great to me. Well, so, and I know you spoke about, you know, how people's platforms and their businesses have changed over time, which I think is only natural, because, you know, we evolve as human beings. Of course, like the products we're putting out there do as well. How has Curated Conversations evolved, or what are some plans for how you'd like to see it evolve?
Oh man, it has been like such the epitome of an evolution. I feel like we are just surfing the waves, man. Like it's crazy. This is exactly why we started this, is because when we launched our agency, I had been doing creative work for about 10 years, just as myself, as a freelancer. And I really, in 2019, looked at what I was doing and was like, okay, social media management really is kind of the bread and butter of what I do, but it's also the most time consuming, and I can only serve so many people. So I'm going to build a team, bring on really talented people, find some awesome clients, high dollar clients, and then 2020 hit and everything fell to shit. So we decided, okay, we're going to pivot. So we pivoted like 25 times. I felt like we tried this thing and that thing and sold this course and did this offer for certain people. So it's been just a constant evolution. And the podcast itself, it's changed, not necessarily the format, but we're more leaning into those guests that are kind of more in the definitely literary field, literary circles, but also more of the like feminine business archetype, and looking at business kind of in a different way, or brand in a different way. So we're kind of steering more clear of the general like digital marketer, you know, typical Gary V, I guess, esque person, or even Amy Porterfield-esque person. We're kind of shifting that into more of the kind of spiritual meets business, meets health, meets, you know, just general wellness, and then having a delightful life. Like, just this podcast is such a light, you know, in people's lives. It's fun, and you can talk about, you know, deep stuff for sure. There's definitely topics, but at the end of the day, like, this is just something that you're doing because it feels good.
Yeah.
You know, which we love.
That has to be the motto of podcasting in general, because God knows the majority of us aren't out here making a buck off of it. So you better love what you're doing.
Yep, absolutely. And it's so fun. Like, I can't think of anything I'd rather be doing than sitting and having a conversation about amazing books that we found that are just a treasure hunt.
So true. And we discovered this when we recorded our episode of Curated Conversations together, that we could talk about romance for hours on end, which I'm sure all of your listeners were just none too pleased about, but it's we could just go on, and thankfully I think we found the perfect book to do that, because reading the book we're going to talk about today is really like reading 10 different books in one, and I mean that in the best way possible. So I'm excited about that.
Absolutely. And this kind of brings me back to my roots, because as a kid, I think we actually discussed this. You weren't much a huge reader as a kid, right?
No, it took me a while until I found the genre that I'd been looking for, I guess.
For sure. And I was the exact opposite. I read everything, anything I could get in my hands on. You think of a series as a like YA series, I've read it. Little House on the Prairie, Babysitter's Club, every Wizard of Oz.
Boxcar Children.
All of it. Party Boys, Nancy Drew, like everything I've read, like as a series as a kid. I loved it, but I never was into romance novels. And so like finding this genre was super interesting. But one of my favorite things to read as a kid were Choose Your Own Adventures.
And we do have that in common, because I think they were very big when I remember like elementary school age, like there being so many. And at that point, they had been out for at least a good 10, 15, 20 years. Because I want to say that these probably had like their peak in like the 80s, like into the 90s. And
I think it was like early 80s was probably like the really crescendo of this genre. It's like this and remember Goosebumps?
Oh,
like Goosebumps in these.
Do I remember Goosebumps? Gosh. And I remember anytime we had like a substitute teacher, one of the things that they would pop in would be like a Goosebumps, episode on a VHS, no less. So great memories. But Choose Your Own Adventure it's one of those things that I think if you are, a millennial, maybe even some Gen Zers, I think you will 100% remember reading a Choose Your Own Adventure at some point, if not reading it, having it come across your desk or through like the school library or something. Like it's something that was just so prevalent in like the early 90s that I'm like, oh yeah, so I love that we're taking that and applying that to romance. And I don't know about you, but this actually wasn't even my first Choose Your Own Adventure romance read. Was this a first for you?
Oh, it was absolutely a first for me. Like I said, I am fairly new. Like I wouldn't say like I'm a newbies, maybe not.
Yeah.
Like, I've read quite a few, but this was my first. I mean, you have genres that I didn't even know were a thing. I mean, I didn't even half the shit that you posted. I'm like, is that real? I didn't know that. And then you use acronyms. I'm like, shit, I'm not one of the cool kids. Like, what does that mean? Like, I'm not picking up what you're throwing down here.
I've been a diehard romance reader for going on like 13, 14 years at this point. And I feel like there are still things that are new to me, that there's still acronyms, that there's still terms and phrases that maybe haven't been on my radar. And then of course we're seeing like things come out in romance that maybe we weren't seeing on the market 5-10 years ago. Like I wasn't seeing monster romance 5 or 10 years ago. That seems relatively new to me, but maybe it was there and it just hadn't had its moment yet. I don't know.
Well, and one thing that's really different too is that because I haven't dated since I was 20,
yeah,
like I've been married since I was 21. So like half the things I'm like, oh my God, thank God I don't have to date, because that sounds horrible. Like the world is just different, right? Like if I was thrown into the dating market now, I'd be like this lost sheep just trying to find anyone to latch onto, because it just seems crazy out there. And these like writers who are writing about these single woman experiences, I'm like, yeah, I never experienced that when I was 20 years old. None of that seemed relevant in my life, but maybe it's how it is now. I don't know.
You lucky duck. I'm so jealous that you don't have to experience the cesspool that is dating today.
No, like the idea of someone sending me a dick pic, I'm like, that would feel like an assault on my eyeballs. Like, I can't believe that this is just a normal thing that people do. I would be like appalled if I opened up my phone and a giant penis was on my screen.
Well, they're usually not giant. So, I mean, it's, let the disappointment set in right now.
Perfect. I'm never dating again. Thank you.
Yeah, that's enough. That's enough to really make whatever relationship, somebody is in seem the most palatable option. Indeed, is just to avoid the dating market once again. So, that's it is what it is. But, well, I'm excited to talk about this one. Let me tell everybody, now that we've, previewed it enough for them that today we're going to be talking about Penelope's Paths by Isabelle Peterson. And this contemporary, as we mentioned, choose your own adventure style romance was published in August 2021. It's available on Amazon for free with Kindle Unlimited. And this is also the first book in the author's What If series. And while she hasn't released any others just yet, keep in mind, this first one just came out a few months ago. According to a post on Goodreads, Isabelle Peterson did mention that she has a few more in the works, and she's even got like possible titles for them, like Ryan's Roads, Jessica's Journeys, Alex's Adventures. So I, for one, am like 100% here for a series of choose your own adventure romances.
Yeah. And then, of course, every time I read anything good, I'm like, I want to write one just like that. You know what I mean? Like, I get all creepy about it. I'm like, oh my God, I could write. And then I think of my friends. I'm like, oh my God, my friend Sarah, I could totally write about her story. And then if she would have chosen this or this or this.
Yeah.
Like, it's such a fascinating model. Like,
it really is.
I would love to write that.
The first time I had heard of something like this was a few years back. I think it was actually the second year of the podcast. We had the option to do a live show with our good friends over at My Worst Date. This is when I was still living in Los Angeles. It was so much fun. And it was such a short show that I wanted to choose something that we could have time to talk about, but also not feel rushed through like an entire novel. So I chose Our Lady's Choosing. I want to say that's what it's called, Our Lady's Choosing. And it was the first time I had heard about a choose your own adventure style romance. I think I picked up a copy at the Ripped Bodice in Los Angeles, so it was meant to be. And it was so much fun. That one, I think, also had a lot of options, as well as like different locations, different time periods, a little bit mixed in there.
I was going to say, it sounds like a nun romance. Is that a thing?
I don't remember there being nuns, but I the one thing that stands out to me from that book is that there was one story where you ended up in Egypt, and I want to say it turned into like hunting for like ancient artifacts, and I think there was also like a lesbian romance thrown into that. So
for all of that.
Yeah. So but since then, and that I think I did release that live show as a podcast episode way back when. So if anybody wants to do the deep dive into it, feel free. But I hadn't really heard about any other choose your own romance since then. And then lo and behold, this one was brought to my attention by the author herself. She, in fact, Isabelle is a supporter on Patreon, and she shot me a message just saying, hey, I'd love to send you a copy of my book. I said, sure. And I was super excited because I just love the idea of like, one, I think so many of us have such a lower attention span these days. And so sitting down to watch I just watched the new Batman movie, and it's like 3 hours. Like sitting down to watch a long movie or read an entire, 400 plus page novel is just really grueling and emotionally taxing. And so novellas have become like my new bread and butter. And this was like reading 10 novellas in one. So I am here for it.
Yeah, for sure. We are actually, my husband and I are rewatching all the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbits to get ready for the new release. It is like going through a freaking semester of college. I'm like, we're going to die here. Jesus.
This is how long. We go.
Watching Frodo Baggins. It's ridiculous. It takes so long. So you're right. Like, it is nice. It's refreshing to just be able to like kind of close the door on a story and then have the opportunity to go back and do another one. Now, to be fair, I did not go back. I wanted to stick with my one pathway so I could deep dive.
That's fine.
I was going to get all jumbled. So I'm like, I'm going to stick to this one. Then I'll probably go back and try to pick other ones.
Well, and I will talk about it more. I got a little bit greedy reading mine because if you remember the old Choose Your Own Adventure books, there was always, I don't know about you, but I always did this where it would say, if you want to go into the tunnel, skip to like page 23 or whatever. I would hold my place in the book, skip to page 23. And then like, if I died a tragic, horrible death, I was like, nah, we're not choosing page 23. We're going back. And so what's interesting about this is because you're reading a digital copy of the book, all it takes is the click of a button. You just click and it automatically navigates you to the next chapter, not in order, but like of where you go next. And at the end of each story, Isabelle would also give you options like, oh, are you satisfied with your ending, or do you wish you had done this instead? And you could click back to the previous choice, or you could go back even further like, oh, do you wish you had not gone clubbing and instead gone on this blind date? Choose this. And so I loved that you could do a full story, but then also if you were unsatisfied, because I will tell you, I did not have a happily ever after in my first story, then I could leave and do another one, and it satisfied me a lot more. So yeah, I love the fact that you can do this so easily with technology. And even though that first one, I should say, like, it's marketed as having 10 potential happily ever afters, or at least happy for nows, because I will say the way mine ended was more of like a personal happy for now, I'm going to find myself kind of story, as opposed to ending up with like your partner that we would see in like a traditional romance. So that, I haven't read all 10 endings. I think I've read 3 or 4 at this point, and the rest of them have ended in a much more traditional happily ever after sort of way that we would expect to see in a romance.
So interesting. Yeah, my path definitely ended up in a place, because I, of course, I don't know if you did this, but what I did in the very beginning was pick what I would have decided myself.
Okay.
Right? Like, I put myself in the shoes, and I was like, what would I do? Because I couldn't think of any other strategy. You know what I mean? So I did that, and it definitely took me to a place where I was like, man, I would never guess that for my life, but like, cool, I'm here for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But that was definitely, I took like a don't want to ruin everything for everybody, but I do want to ask you point blank, did you pick clubbing or did you pick the blind date?
So initially I picked the blind date, because I just am like, nothing good has ever, I've never met somebody that I'd wanted to pursue a relationship with at a club or a bar. So I guess maybe subconsciously I also sort of went with my own personal choice. And so picking the blind date seemed like the better option to me. The even safer option, shall we say, which is even made more ironic when you find out that the guy that you're on the blind date with is like a super kinky British dude.
Right. For sure. Like, that first decision right after we picked the blind date, I was like, I'm out. I'm out for all. I gotta go. Like, I'm not doing that. None of that sounds like a good idea.
God.
So freaking funny. Plus, like, clubbing just doesn't sound, I'm tired. I'm 37. I don't want to go and wear heels somewhere. Like,
right.
I'll wear boots to dinner, you know? Like, it just seemed like too much effort to go to a club. I just can't, like, hang in with that energy.
I am 100% with you. And before we go into, like, our choices and the details of our choices, I do want to read like a brief synopsis from Goodreads for everybody. And I know that this is a less than traditional format as far as romance novels go, so the format of the synopsis is also a little bit different, but this just kind of gives you a little brief insight into the character that you are taking on if you decide to read this book, because no matter all the choices, being given to you, everybody is reading as Penelope. You are playing the character of Penelope. So let me tell you a little bit about Penelope and how she gets to this particular path in her life. So we'll start with this. After a humiliating divorce, Penelope Pierce is about to try her luck in the dating world for the first time in years. Luckily, she has her 2 best friends to help her face the single scene. Laura, single and loving life, wants to bring Penelope to the club scene. Drink, dance, have fun, nothing serious. Her married friend, Shannon, on the other hand, wants to set Penelope up with a guy from her husband's legal firm, insisting he's perfect for Penelope. Should Penelope go on the blind date or hit the clubs? It's up to you, the reader. So there is more in the synopsis, but that just kind of like generally sets up where the first choice begins, which is the one we were just talking about of, do you go clubbing or do you go on the blind date? So there's like a few more details about like if you go on the blind date, you meet this like British man. But if you go to the clubs, you might meet this musician. And it's actually a very long synopsis, but it ends with you, the reader, will make Penelope's choices and you will determine which kind of risks Penelope takes and what kinds of romances Penelope gets. Your choices will bring about a wide range of favorite romance tropes and adventures. Most are happy endings. However, as in life, things don't always work out. But one of the best parts about Penelope's paths, when you get to the end, you can go back, make different choices, and enjoy an entirely different story. 1 heroine, 9 potential heroes, 10 unique endings. So there you go.
I hope that life is like that. Like when we finally go, we get to pick, please take me back to page 75. I want to start this over again.
That would be like, honestly, if I could envision like the best version of like what the afterlife looks like, that would be it. Would be like, I'm just going to go back and relive different moments of my life. And then maybe that is like some weird like space-time continuum of like another version, another reality that we live in afterwards. I would love that.
I'm just going to bank on that.
Yeah, manifest. We're manifesting our beach trip to Mexico and the afterlife choose your own adventure.
Yep, just little things.
So we both began, it seems like the same way. We both went with the blind date, which then leads you to the hunky British man who, though he seems, it's the typical, like, I feel like Christian Grey, like scene where it's, he's very well put together, very well mannered. And then you find out he's a kinky dom and he's looking for his submissive.
Correct. And so that was an easy choice for me because I'm not good at taking direction in general. So that would be a disaster for me. I would go back to don't collect $200. Mm-hmm. I would be out for that game. I'm just not good at being bossed around.
Yeah.
So that wouldn't work for me.
Okay. So you said no to, spoiler alert, handing over your panties at the dinner table to William.
Also, that whole idea, even if my own husband, who I've been married to for 15 years, asked me to do that, I would never do that. Because I've had 6 children, and you don't want anything to do with these underwear. They are not for consumer use.
I have to say, one of my things, everybody has their things that they love to spend a little bit extra on to treat themselves. And I love buying bras and panties, like the matching sets. It's like one of my favorite things to do. And it's not that I'm wearing them for anybody to see or to show them off. It is literally just because they feel like butter and they make me feel good. So I said that I'd hand him over my panties.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I'd be like taking off spandex. I'd be like, these are some biker shorts. I'm not wearing underwear. I'm wearing biker shorts. So here, super sexy for you.
It'd be harder to take off at the table. That's for sure.
People would notice. That's for damn sure.
Yeah. So you said no to handing over your panties. I chose to hand them over. So where did your path lead from there?
So this was super interesting because it took me in a place that I was really into. I was like, yes, for this. It takes you driving away. Okay. And it takes you to a flat tire.
Oh, I love it. Okay.
And it takes you to someone that rolls up on a motorcycle and helps you fix your tire. So good. So it was someone who, versus a dominant, someone that's bossing you around, someone who is of service, because that is my love language, service, that just helps you get your tire changed, takes care of you, is a protector. Come by my shop tomorrow. Here's my card. All in for it. All in.
Yes. Okay. And then what? Then where did we go?
So then you decide if you're going to invite him to a dinner that your 2 friends that were supposed to be your friends, they bailed on you. And so they said, are you going to invite him to this dinner or not? You go to dinner and you start forming this relationship. And am I okay to just kind of spoil it?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. This is where it took not a turn in a negative way, but a turn that I was like, I did not see that coming. So it turns out this amazing motorcycle shop owner is also a Marine, an ex-Marine.
Okay.
Super popular around the town. Everybody knows him because he's a nice guy. He does all these things. Turns out that while he was in the Marines, became pansexual, was pansexual, was dating a man who was going into gender reassignment surgery, but overdosed. So Joey, whatever the person's name was, he passed away.
Oh my
but
God.
Penelope has to decide, am I going to continue this relationship with this news that I'm dating someone who used to date someone who was transitioning? Or do I just take some space and do something different? And I picked continue the relationship. It was so good. And then at the end, it turns out Penelope's going to this LGBTQ plus parade and like supporting the community, but still in a relationship with this guy. Amazing.
Oh my God. And you know what? I never would have seen that coming. Like
exactly.
And one of the things I really liked about this book is that it kept defying like my expectations. Like I'll talk about my second path that I chose in a minute, but my first one was I did give him my panties. And then following the dinner, I'm trying to remember, we don't actually like go home together. I think it's because William, the British guy, is also a father. And so it's something about, oh no, I might be mixing him up with somebody else.
That's exactly why. I was like, I'm going to scramble it up because I can't pick two different paths.
I think what it was there was something where it's like we went to dinner and then you could either tell him, yes, I'm game to continue this and pursue this like BDSM relationship with you. Or you could say, you know what? It's not for me. And I think I chose the first time around, I said, it's not for me. And he was very respectful in his like email response. But so I'm trying to remember how that led to the next one. But what it led to after that was meeting this German man named Christoph. And Christoph is just a tall drink of water. And I think he's the one who maybe has a kid. Oh, that's what it was. Yeah, you find out he has a kid because at first at your dinner together, he seems kind of... I was thinking he was maybe a little bit sketchy because he keeps getting like text messages like from his ex-wife, but he calls her his wife and not his ex-wife multiple times. And he's like, oh yeah. And so I kept thinking, oh, maybe he's cheating and this is just like a really sketchy setup. But really what you find out is that he's kind of fresh from divorce because he found out his wife was cheating on him with another woman and that they fell in love and now she's with this other woman. And so they're having to figure out like the co-parenting situation, which kind of works well with Penelope's character because Penelope also has like deep-rooted insecurities from being cheated on by her ex-husband. So that all was great. But then when you go to bed with Christoph, he's like a 3-pump chump. Like it seems like it's going to be so hot. And then the minute he gets inside of her, he's like, that was great. And she's like, excuse me?
We're not done.
Yeah, and then it like ends. It ends where they've had really bad sex and she decides, okay, you know what? This was like a good start to getting back out into the dating world, but this ain't it. This ain't it, son. I think I'm going to need to move on and figure out some other things. And then it ends.
Oh my God. That is terrible.
So that was the first ending for me. And you can see why I was very unsatisfied, as was Penelope. And so I was like, well, I guess I'll go back to the BDSM Brit. So I went back to
that's my two choices, I guess.
I'm like, if I get this guy who is like really romantic, but like has really bad sex, and then I get the British guy who seems like he knows what he's doing, I'll go check him out. And so I followed through on the William BDSM relationship storyline, which was good. I mean, it was very much like they have their first, dom sub romantic interlude. And
you call that experience like a session.
Yeah, or session. And it goes well. And I think that was the end of that story as well, was you have it. It seems like you're going to continue this relationship with him and great, but the one that I really enjoyed most was, I was like, well, I got to know what happens if you go to the club. I have to know what happens if you go the other way? And so the club scene, I kind of went the opposite way that I had with my previous ones, because I'm with you. I would never be at the club in general. So I was like, you know what? This time around, I'm going to pick all the things that I would never normally pick. This is the new strategy.
I love it.
So I go to the club. Already problem number 1. Problem number 2, you start like dancing and making out with this guy on the dance floor. I'm like, well, this is a bad idea, like right away. You find out he's a musician. Red flag number 3. Like, this is all kinds of.
Do you end up at his mom's house is what I want to know.
No. So, but you decide you're going to have like a one night stand with him. And I'm like, okay, I mean, that's really all that I'm willing to give this man in general. And he ends up being a precious angel. Like, you have this super hot one night stand with him. He's a musician, but he's a musician in like a touring orchestra. So he's like a classy musician. And then he wants to continue having a relationship with Penelope, and she, is like, I'm not sexy. Like, I've only been with this one guy. And he makes her feel all kinds of sexy. And it all leads to a surprise pregnancy.
Oh, that's your favorite. As we all know, listening. Surprise pregnancies for everyone.
Oh, gosh. Yeah. And it ends happily, and everything with them being together, and he proposes and they're planning a wedding and they're having a baby and all this stuff. But I never would have anticipated that ending from choosing the club scene.
Right. I have a cousin who met her husband and father of her daughters at a taco stand. So I'm like, man, you can find people anywhere.
It's true. I can't find anybody anywhere, but Penelope can pick them out of the club and make it last forever.
Absolutely. Surprise pregnancies for all. That's what you need to manifest. Where can I find a surprise pregnancy?
No, you bite your tongue.
Let's go there.
But yeah, I will say, I think one of the things I noticed that I thought was really, really fun was, I think it was between the hookup with Kristoff, there's mention of Penelope like saying something like, oh my God, I wasn't planning on like hooking up with anybody tonight. So like I haven't shaved or like trimmed my areas in any way. Mm-hmm. And then I thought it was so funny that on the flip side, if you go the clubbing route, when she hooks up with the musician, I think his name is Mitchell, she makes mention of, oh, thank God my friend talked me into like, trimming and maintaining my regions just in case I got lucky tonight. And I was like, oh my God, I love that we've got follow through on even the details of like what you're wearing underneath your clothing in each scene.
Right, for sure. We used to call that roadblocks when you're like, I'm going out to not hook up with somebody. Roadblocks all around. Just make sure those are put in place before with the intention of nothing's happening tonight.
Yeah, are you wearing, did you shave your legs? Nope. Okay. And then also, are you wearing biker shorts under your dress? Well, you're not taking off your panties at the table then. That's it.
I'm not going home with a damn person. I got armpit hair. I got hair everywhere. That's what we're doing.
The other thing I noticed that do you remember that in the old Choose Your Own Adventure romances, and not romances, but Choose Your Own Adventures, that it was always written in second person point of view, where it would be like, you do this, you make this choice, you have to. I like that was not the POV for this one. I feel like that would have driven me crazy.
Yeah. Those are really tough to read in general. Second persons are really hard, and I feel like they kind of only do work for the traditional YA Choose Your Own Adventures.
Yeah. And I get why they do it for Choose Your Own Adventure, because it's placing you in the story. Like we're not giving you a name, we're not saying what you look like. But I liked that there was like a specific character that we could like attach ourselves to, and then at the same time be at least a little bit removed, where you're like, okay, it's not me, it's me as Penelope. It's kind of like playing a video game where it's like, this is the character that I'm playing.
Yeah, it feels like instead of first person shooter game, you're a character that you can actually see moving around.
Yeah.
For sure. I did really like that. Yeah, and I thought it was totally cute. It was like a light read. It was super interesting, all the details that she wove in. Like, I loved, at least for my character, which is my favorite part about this path, the guy's name is Ridge. And when she asks him, she's like, where did you get your nickname? He's like, well, like, he was embarrassed to talk about it. He's like, when I was in basic training, they give everyone nicknames, so this guy got this nickname, this guy got this nickname. And she's like, okay, well, how did you get your nickname? He's like, gray sweatpants. She's like, what are you talking about? He's like, I would wear gray sweatpants and I could see the outline of my ridge. And so that's what they called me. I was like, perfect. This guy's a keeper.
I'm so disappointed I didn't get to that one yet. So between the two of us, we've only read 4 outcomes. We've read William, the British BDSM dude. We've read Ridge, I love it, the biker. We've read... let's see. Oh, Mitchell, the musician, and then Christoph, who seems like a great idea at the time and really just does not deliver. So I'm curious because it says there are 9 potential matches. We've still got half of the book to go.
I gotta go back. I have to know. Now that I don't have to remember timelines in my brain, it's like time travel. I'm like, I don't know what planet we're on or what timeline. So yeah, I got to find out all the answers because it's super interesting. I love it. I love this format.
Yeah, well, and I will tell you, and also anybody listening who maybe wants a shortcut, like you don't have the patience to read each storyline, Isabelle actually has a link at the end of this book that takes you to her website, I believe, where there is a map, a drawing of how each choice can lead to different choices and who the possible outcomes are for each one. So if you're like, I just need to know how I get to this, you can find it. She's got it for you on her website. And I'm totally that person. I will probably go look and decide, oh, I want to see how you get to this guy, because I know from just the setup in this book, there was mention of a veterinarian that like has moved into the office next door. And I was like, oh my God, he's got to have a story in this. There has to be like an enemies to lovers. Yeah. Like neighbors next door. I want it. I want that one.
Okay. I love that. I'm going to go hunting for that. And that actually brings up a really good point. I love the idea that you could kind of even crowdsource writing a book like this. Like you could open it up to your followers and be like, what are your best ideas for outcomes, locations? Like, I love that we're going to end up in Egypt and do a Indiana Jones theme. I don't know. Like, there's all sorts of things you can do, but it just gives so many possibilities that you're not tied down to making sure all the, threads are in place, all of the timelines are woven. It's like, no, you can go crazy and make whatever you want happen.
I mean, with the musician, one of the options that I could have chosen was to like jet off to Europe with him as he goes on this tour. And I was like, no, I don't want to. And so I liked that by not going with him, we still stayed together. We just had this like long distance relationship as I was surprised by my pregnancy. But it makes me wonder, like, oh my gosh, if I had gone to Europe, would I have like had a European fling? Like what would have happened over there, And so I love this idea though of just kind of polling your readers on like, what are some of your favorite tropes? What are some of your favorite hero types and heroines? Like who and what do you love to read? And I will find a place for it in this book.
I would love to hear how she came up with these ending heroes. Yeah. I would totally like the whole LGBTQ, partnership where they're in this, I don't even know what you call that, like cisgender, heteronormative seeming relationship, but his background is not that. And so they are just, obviously embraced by that community and go and participate and support, even though from the outside, you wouldn't consider that relationship as labeled as that. Do you know what I mean? So it's like, how did she come up with that? It's fascinating. I love it.
Right. And I feel like we also just in general don't get to see enough male characters like on the LGBTQ spectrum. Like I feel like usually when we see male characters who are queer, it's usually that they're partnered with other male characters. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I love seeing bisexual men, pansexual men. Like, and if they end up with a woman, that doesn't make them any less queer. Like, that's just the person they're with.
Literally, one of my favorite examples of this was Schitt's Creek. It was like David Rose and
the wine.
Oh my God. I was just like, that is like such a hot scene. And then he's like now with David. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, his partner, all of it. I'm there for it. And I'm like, show me this in a romance novel. I want this whole story arc. I love it.
I love red wine and white wine and rosé and red wine that used to be white wine. Like, it's one of the best analogies I've ever heard in relation to that. And it's fantastic. But yeah, no. And now I want to go find the Ridge story. Like, that sounds great.
Yeah, it is good. I'm going to be following all the different storylines. And yeah, if you have any input from the author about how she came up with these, I would love to hear that on a future podcast.
I would too. So Isabelle, I'm coming for you. I want to know what's up and how you chose what you chose. But it makes me curious too about like future books in this potential series. And like, I mean, honestly, I'd love to see the perspective of like one of the male characters. Like, I'd love to see like what his choices might be. I'd love to see, I don't know, like you could do anything. You could do historical, you could do, but I mean, personally, I would love if one of the paths led to something that was like romantic suspense where it's like they're on the run or something.
Yeah. I want to just blend all these different genres we've talked about. Hit me with the mafia storyline. Hit me with the monsters. Hit me with BDSM, I guess, which I don't know. Those are always so tough for me because I'm like, man, I would be purple. I would walk around being black and blue and bruised head to toe because I cannot follow directions for the life of me. So I would just be a wreck the whole time.
Yes.
So here for reading about it, sure. Like, hit me with all of those different fantasies.
Well, and it's great because you can write about literally anything you want. Like, you can put in as many different things as you want. And so long as you have that one central character, it's just a matter of, well, how would they respond? Like, if they were given two choices to respond to this situation, what would be the two? I think for me, if I have any, it's hard to have like negative feedback about something like this because so much of it is like the choices that you're making as the character. And if you end up in bed with Kristoff and it sucks, it's your own damn fault. But I say to myself, and one of the things though that I wish maybe there had been more of is the choices. Like, I do wish maybe there were more things to choose from. Like, and they could have been more mundane things too. Like, does she wear this outfit or this outfit? Does she, go here or go here? And I know that would make things more complicated as far as like the writing part of it. Like, I'm trying to make the writer's job harder right now by suggesting this, but
I need 10 more options, please. Figure that out.
Just more. And it's not that I need more outcomes, just like more options on like how to get to those outcomes. Like, I would have liked to have some more choices because these were relatively long-ish stories. Sometimes you would maybe only make like two choices per story and each one would last like 50 pages. So
yeah, I agree. I think, and it would be interesting too. It feels like there weren't so many like big decisions to make either, like forks in the road, you know what I mean? So, but I do like that the outcomes were not all happily ever afters because I think that puts in a layer of, makes you want to go back, right? If they were all amazing, then you had no incentive to go back. So it's fun. I do wish maybe you would have died or something, like you would have gotten yellow fever or fallen off a cliff. Like, that would be fun.
Now it sounds like Oregon Trail, like the game Oregon Trail.
Mine's going to be Oregon Trail themed. That's what my romance is.
And we all caught dysentery.
Right. Fell off a cliff, fell into the river.
Forged the river.
Right. But like, yeah, there weren't as many forks in the road, but like big decision makers where you had to look at an inner compass to choose. And so I totally wish there were more of those, but maybe that's what all the different books are for, is you get to kind of experience that with other characters.
Yeah. Now let's talk about the steam, because even though we've got multiple different stories to choose from within this story, I will say that all of the ones that I chose did have some version of on the page explicit sex. So I was happy about that. I mean, obviously, some scenes were better than others. Christoph, I'm looking at you. But did you have a steamy scene, a sexcerpt from your time with Ridge that you wanted to share?
I did have a steamy scene. I will say that, not that there's really any true resemblance to my husband and this character. But I think out of anyone that they've described, it's probably the closest, because this character specifically is very protective is not the right word. When I say protective, it reminds me of like the mafia stories we're talking about, where they're like crazy and overprotective and psycho. That's not what I mean, but just like wanting to make sure you're okay, wanting to make sure you're not getting hurt, wanting to make sure you're okay, that kind of a thing. So it kind of gave those vibes. So to me, when I'm reading romance or like fantasy, I want it to be like different than my normal life. So this one, while it was steamy, it definitely was like, okay, this could have been a scene from my room 2 weeks ago or something. You know what I mean? So,
do you mean that there was like a lot of, I mean, it sounds like a lot of like consent talk, like as far as like time in the bedroom?
Right. So here's the scene. Shifting, he reaches down between us, and as he kisses my breasts, his tongue flicking at my nipples, he slides a finger inside of me. You're so tight, he says breathlessly. I don't want to hurt you. So it's a lot of that.
Okay. Well, and see, and personally, I like stuff like that. I love seeing the like continuous consent and check-ins like in scenes. I love that because I happen to love reading scenes that seem very much reflected from like real life experiences, or like, oh, this could happen to me, like, oh, this is what this scene should look like in real life, like I know some people read romance purely for the escape. I'm not one of those people, so that's just me.
Right. And that's exactly the opposite of my preference. It's like, in real life, love that. I want to make sure I can walk tomorrow also. Thank you for your concern. But like in a story, I want it to be crazy, something that I would be like, whoa, that's a whole different experience. Let me live in your shoes vicariously, because that is not what I'm experiencing on a day-to-day life. Someone just like there was a book me and Krista read. It was like someone in an office that just like over a desk pulled a skirt up, plunged it in really quick, and then walked away to a meeting. I'm like,
yikes.
What? Don't you have to like clean up, or like just logistically, all of that seems like it wouldn't make sense. So I love reading about that because I'm like, none of that's real.
Although I do appreciate the fact that they were doing it in the office, because one of the things that drives me nuts about any like office place romance, if somebody is not getting like banged across a desk or like a copy machine or something, I'm just like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Like you're setting up my expectations so high and then not delivering.
Right. Why are you even in here? There's way more comfortable places than that. If you're not getting a Xerox copy of your butt cheeks, then there's zero reason to be in here.
You're not doing it right.
Correct.
Well, I had, let me share a scene with you. This is from when Penelope, and that's the other thing is if you look at like the chapter titles, it's very basic. It'll say like Penelope invites Mitch home. Penelope does this. So it's a nice way to like kind of just keep track of like any notes that you might make in the book. Not that everybody's making notes. I am, but that's me. One of my other ones is from the chapter, does not pursue things with William. So this is from when Penelope does invite Mitch, who is the musician, home with her. They have what seems like it's going to be a one-night stand, but really he just kind of like stays and doesn't leave for a while. And then they end up having breakfast the next day. And what starts as an innocent pancake breakfast gets a little bit sticky. So literally. So let me share a brief excerpt from this, because I like when people get playful in their sex scenes. And this is a great example of that. He leans down and slowly licks off the sweet syrup, first with a pointed tongue, then a wide, flat tongue. And when I say syrup, I mean like actually like syrup. Maple syrup. Yeah, like just so we're clear. My toes curl as the movement is felt between my legs, as if my nipples and clit are connected. I roll my hips up toward him as much as I can, and he sucks my nipple into his mouth, sucking firmly. Please, I beg, more. He sits back and studies my face. I'm sure my cheeks are flushed and eyes wild. He has a way of doing that to me. More? He asks. Yeah, I can do more. Loosening his grip on my wrists, he drags his fingers down my arms. Don't move, he cautions. With the tone of his warning, I wouldn't dare. I remain as still as I can as his touch, his kisses, and his tongue travel over my belly before he slides lower and pulls the sheet from my lap. He reaches over to the table with a devilish gleam in his eyes and picks up the small pitcher of syrup. My heart thunders in my chest. You wouldn't. Oh, but I would, he answers, and then slowly dribbles the syrup along my inner thigh and right up to my mound.
No, that is a disaster waiting to happen.
So just to be clear, they do say at the end of the chapter, they're like, well, I guess we have to take another shower and wash the sheets. I'm like, great. I love that. Do I love that you brought sticky food into bed? Absolutely not. But I appreciate that you are willing to clean up your mess.
And I appreciate that you addressed that. You weren't like, this is a normal thing that like would just happen. Then we go about our day, just like the office thing. It's like, no, you have, there's like aftermath that you have to handle.
So like, see, you like some element of reality.
I do, yeah. Stuff like that, I'm like, because in my mind, I'm like, that's a disaster. That's stains. It's going to ruin my thread count. Like in my mind, I'm going through all the things that I would never want that to happen in real life. So.
Oh yeah, and I'm always keeping an eye on like, oh, this is a possible UTI, like waiting to happen. Like thankfully, nobody was putting anything inside of anybody. It was just like, we're just going to dribble it on top because the minute you start putting something inside of somebody that's not supposed to be there, my mind jumps to UTI.
Right. And then immediately you're like, cool, with that antibiotic, you're also going to get a yeast infection. This is a horrible problem that now has occurred because of a pancake breakfast.
And you know what? There are too many romance novels that try to make pancakes specifically the super sexy food. I don't know what it is, but I have read multiple books. I can think of 3 just for the podcast where there is a scene that starts with pancakes and devolves into something very sticky. And when did pancakes become sexy? Because I love pancakes, but like, I just want to take a nap after having pancakes.
There ain't nothing sexy about pancakes in my world. I mean, you should see me making pancakes. It is a disaster. It's like a full 4-hour process because we have so many kids, so we batch them. So you can see on my Instagram, there's like pancake party pictures. Ain't nothing sexy about that. So I love that these people are going to a town on this. Are any of those romance novels like about chefs specifically?
No, not one of them, but I do have chef romances that I can recommend you. They just, I don't know why all the high class chef books, they're not making pancakes. I'm like, pancakes are a great dish. Don't get me wrong, but yeah, the chefs are always making something fancier.
Right. Yeah, I don't know what it is about like hot chefs, but that really does it for me. I'm gonna need a romance novels with the chefs.
Yeah. We'll talk. We will talk about that. Well, do you have any other notes about this one before we give this a few grades?
Other notes? I would just say give it a try. Like, especially if you're a newbie. If you're a true newbie, this is such a great tiptoe into it because they're short, and you don't have to like, and also I will say, especially, I'm going to kind of spoiler alert this too. Right after I read this, because it was so short and I didn't want to get jumbled, it was only like 9:00 when I was done. So I was like, I have time to squeeze in another book. So I read one of the books that you had referenced on your Instagram. Of course, I stayed up till 2 reading it because I'm an idiot and like couldn't put it down. That one, the sex scenes were intense. Like they were real filthy dirty talking. Like it was just like a whole different level. So this, while it's steamy and I did appreciate it and it felt real, it had good imagery. It wasn't that level. So if you're new, this is a good starter pack for sure.
I agree. It's one of the reasons why I usually recommend like anthologies to a lot of like newbie romance readers, because it's a great way to find, with the traditional anthology, you have multiple authors publishing in one book, multiple shorter stories. And I think that's what's great about it is you can find authors that you might want to go read something else of theirs. You might come across, stories that don't necessarily work for you, whether it's the subject matter or the writing style. And this is similar to that. The only exception being that it's one author penning 10 different novellas in one book. And so I think it's a great way to if nothing else, to maybe figure out some tropes that you enjoy. Maybe you get very pissed off when you make it to that secret pregnancy or that surprise pregnancy. Maybe, there's just certain stories that'll work better for you than others. And this is what I talk about when I say that there's so much you can learn about yourself and like what you enjoy both in fiction and in real life when you're reading romance. And so I think this is a great book to start that off for you. And then, if nothing else, you can go read more Isabelle Peterson.
Absolutely. Yeah. Have you read any of her other books?
I haven't. This was my first one. So I was very excited. And I think this was a great intro because I loved a lot of the humor. There were a lot of like conversations between Penelope and her girlfriends and situations she'd be in where I'm like, I can see where if this is the same tone that she uses in her other books, I would really enjoy it.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, I think it was great. Good starter.
Yay! Okay, well, I'm a teacher at heart, so we need to give some grades to Penelope's Paths, and we will be rating for heart, humor, and heat on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the very best that it could possibly be for you, of course. So let's start with heart. Again, I think this is going to be a weird book to rate with our typical rating system, but go ahead. We'll figure it out.
Yeah, I'm going to just pick my specific path. And I think for heart for this one, I'm going to give it like a maybe 7.5, 8, because I just loved how it really made her look at herself and her own kind of biases and just like her own way of judging herself. I think a big thing that came up with her a lot, which I didn't really super identify with. I don't know if I would have had the same emotions if it came up for me as a person, but for her, she felt very insecure and not very sexy.
Yeah.
And that whole pansexual revelation, it made her feel even more insecure. Like, oh my gosh, I'm not only competing with women, but now I'm competing with like men out there. And so now it's like anyone could scoop him up, type thing. But then at the end, she realized like, I'm being ridiculous. Like, I like really care about this person. I want to be with them. I should just be with him. So for heart for me, because it was a very like kind of liberating journey for her and it made her look at her own like either preferences or experiences in the past, give it a 7.5. It was good.
Yeah, yours does sound like it was a fairly high heart concentration. Like and what's interesting that I think about it is, when you read the synopsis, you're presented with Penelope and how she got to this point that she's at. She's divorced from who was basically her, I forget if he was her high school sweetheart or her college sweetheart, but it's the one guy she's ever been with. It's the one guy she's ever dated. She talks about in multiple stories how she's insecure about like pleasing her partners sexually because her husband apparently didn't like the way she gave blowjobs and he criticized her when she was on top. And this came in different stories that I read as well. And it sounds like it came up in the one that you read. So no matter how the paths change, she still has the same background. She still has like the same character, insecurities across the board. So it is interesting just seeing kind of like the different characters she meets. How do they affect those things, the baggage that she's bringing with her into that new relationship? And so for me, the one that I thought transpired the most heartfelt way was probably with her connection with Mitchell, the musician, especially because they still try to like continue a relationship even when he leaves to go on his like European or orchestra tour. So that one I would probably give like a 7 for heart. And it makes me wonder what other ones are in the book, because I'm sure some will be funnier and some will be more heartfelt and some will be a little bit steamier, as evidenced by like the BDSM relationship. So lots of choices. I'm sure the heart, humor, and heat levels will fluctuate across whatever path you choose.
Yeah, agreed. And that's why humor for me was maybe even like at a 5, because there wasn't a whole lot of humorous interactions for sure.
Yeah. I mean, mine had like pancake syrup, so I'm like, that's a little bit funny, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if there were like laugh out loud moments for me. I'd probably go with like a 4 or 5, at least on the ones that I've read. I did like a lot of the like banter between her and her friends. I thought that was like a fun addition, but is it super laugh out loud rom-com? Maybe in ones that I haven't read yet, but in the ones that I did read, there was like some light humor. So
yeah.
Heat on the other hand, I'm curious.
Yeah, heat for mine. This is so tough because I read that
I know.
book afterwards, so that was like way steamier. But
the book, by the way, for people who are wondering, is Ruthless Creatures. I posted about it. I think I'm forgetting the author. I want to say it's J.T.
Something with
it starts with a G. Gleisinger, something like that. But that, yeah, I've already gone on to read the next book in the series. It is like crazy spicy mafia book.
Super spicy. Yeah. So this one, I mean, I guess in comparison in general, like I said before, it's a good starter. So maybe like a 6.5, 7.
Okay. Yeah. And thinking about the ones I read, the BDSM one, you know, even though they're talking about like BDSM play in it, I don't even know if I would rate that as like the hottest one that I read, just because in the one that she has with Mitchell, the musician, they have sex like more than once. Like there's more than one encounter. And like at first it's like a super steamy one night stand kind of sex. But then it's like we're falling in love with each other kind of sex. So I'm like, okay, you get more variety with that. But if you want like the dom subplay, you get like that in the story with William. So I think on average between the two, I'd probably give it like a 6 or 7. Like I think like with the rest of the stories, some are going to be hotter, some are going to not be as hot. I think Isabelle Peterson even said in the synopsis or one of her author comments that there will be certain ones where there's no explicit like on the page sex. So, you know, that there's something for everybody, I guess.
For sure. But you have to read the adventure and find out.
I know. Yeah, no, I'm really excited to, especially since, you know, you and I both have been reading that Mafia series. This will be like something that I can follow that up with when I need like a shorter burst of bright energy that's not people killing people left and right. And
or people bossing you around. See, I just have such a it's cool to read, but I'm like, man, that just rubs me the wrong way. Don't tell me what to do.
Yeah, no, I much prefer them jetting off with like a random musician or going, you know, clubbing. I want to find the veterinarian. I am determined to find the vet. He's got to be in there.
He's absolutely going to be in there. And then we'll have to DM each other on Instagram to see what we thought.
Found him.
He has choices.
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm so excited that we did this. And I'm glad that, you know, I know that you've read some romance as well, but that you were willing to kind of step outside the box and read something like Penelope's Paths, because this is not like the most of the romance novels I feel like people are reading. It's, yes, there are tropes and there are character types in each of the stories that are reminiscent of novels and novellas that we're reading, but it's not very often you get to read a choose your own romance adventure. So I think it's something everybody should try.
Absolutely. And to be super honest, I didn't even realize Kindle Unlimited has so many treasures. So that already revolutionized my reading, because I'm like,
yeah,
everything, there's so much. There's just an ocean of opportunity to read out on here.
100% worth the subscription. Like, so many indie authors especially are publishing through Kindle Unlimited, and it's so great. It's such a great resource to be able to like read as many books as you want without, I know there's been like a ton of controversy on especially Book Talk lately, where people are talking about how some people are like buying authors' books on Kindle and then returning them so they can get their money back. And that is screwing over authors who are like putting out their books for you. But Kindle Unlimited does not work the same way. Kindle Unlimited is like a library, because you're paying that monthly subscription fee that you can check these books in and out. That is what it is designed for. So if you are somebody,
get the royalties, right, from that.
Yes, and they're still getting their money. They're not having, every time you return a book in Kindle Unlimited, the author does not have to like pay back the fee of that book. They are getting money out of the subscription that you have to check out these books and check them back in. I will say though, if you do, I learned this from this controversy that's come about on Book Talk. I'm not going to say I learned a lot of things on Book Talk in general, but this one I did find interesting, is that if you check out a book on Kindle Unlimited for a second time, you decide you want to reread Penelope's Paths, they do not get money from that. So if you find a book in Kindle Unlimited that you really enjoy and you think that you want to read it again, buy the book, whether you're buying the physical copy or the digital copy. Otherwise, the author is not going to get the money that they obviously so deserve.
For sure. And they are usually not expensive books. You're not buying some hardcover edition in Barnes & Noble that's wrapped in alligator skin.
I mean, you can if you want, but...
Collector's edition. But give these people the money.
You know what? If it's pretty, I'll buy it. I'm a sucker for a beautiful cover. They say don't judge a book for a cover. I do... And I'm not ashamed. I'm not ashamed.
I buy everything for its cover. I drank in the worst wines in the world because the label was cute. So ain't no judgment here.
You and me both. God, they got us. They got us. But this has been so much fun, Rosemary. And I'm so excited that we had another chance to talk about romance. And I'm sure this will not be the last of our romance discussions.
You better believe it won't be, because I'm about to volunteer for the things you talked about. I'm so excited.
And soon we'll take our beach trip to Mexico.
Manifesting it. Love it.
Thanks so much for listening. Boobies and Newbies is part of the Frolic Podcast Network. Find more podcasts you'll love at frolic.media/podcasts. You can follow Boobies and Newbies on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Boobies Podcast.